In 1964, a 17-year-old boy was kept awake for 11 days straight. Scientists watched. They took notes. They didn't stop him. By day 4, he couldn't focus his eyes. By day 7, he was hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there, hearing things that weren't real. By day 11, when researchers asked him to count backward from 100 by sevens, he made it to 65 and just stopped. When they asked why, he said he'd forgotten what he was doing. This wasn't torture. This wasn't a hostage situation. This was a high school science fair project. And it's one of 3 experiments in this video that reveal something genuinely unsettling about what your mind is capable of doing to you and what it's capable of surviving. All 3 of these were completely legal. 2 of them are still studied in psychology textbooks today, and every single one of them will tell you something true about your own brain that you probably don't want to know. His name was Randy Gardner. December 1963, San Diego. He was 17, and he needed an idea for the school science fair. He and 2 friends decided to try to break the world record for staying awake, which at the time was around 260 hours, set by a radio DJ in Honolulu. They flipped a coin. Randy stayed awake. His friend Bruce would monitor him. Within 3 nights, Bruce was so exhausted from staying up to watch Randy that he was found asleep, leaning against a wall, scribbling notes directly onto the wallpaper. They had to recruit a 3rd friend just to keep the monitoring going. Then the story got bigger. A Stanford sleep researcher named William Dement heard about it and drove down personally to observe. He brought a Navy doctor, Lieutenant Commander John Ross, to monitor Randy's vital signs. What started as a high school project turned into one of the only real scientific records of extreme human sleep deprivation that exists. Day 2, Randy's eyes stopped focusing properly. Day 3, he lost the ability to identify objects by touch alone. He'd hold something in his hand and couldn't tell what it was without looking. By day 4, he was irritable and uncoordinated. This was just the beginning. To keep him going, Dement played basketball and pinball with him. Here's a strange detail. Randy remembered winning most of the time at pinball. He actually won every single game. His memory of his own performance was already starting to disconnect from reality, and he didn't notice. And it kept getting stranger. By the 2nd week, things that weren't real started becoming completely indistinguishable from things that were. Around day 7, Randy began hallucinating. He thought he was a famous football player. He became convinced a street sign was a person. He grew paranoid, at one point accusing a radio announcer of insulting him personally on air. His short-term memory was failing so badly that researchers documented him forgetting questions mid-sentence while he was still answering them. On day 11, the final day, researchers gave him a basic cognitive test. Count backward from 100, subtracting 7 each time. 100, 93, 86, 79. He made it to 65. Then he just stopped talking. When they asked him why, he said he'd forgotten what he was supposed to be doing. Mid-sentence, mid-task, gone. 264 hours and 24 minutes. That was the final number, a new world record. Then Randy went to sleep and slept for about 14 hours straight. He woke up, and within a few days, he was essentially back to normal. No lasting brain damage. No permanent psychological scarring. His brain had been pushed to what looked like a complete breakdown, and it recovered almost entirely. Here's what Randy said decades later, reflecting on it. Physically, I didn't have any problems, but the mental part is what went downhill. The longer I stayed awake, the more irritable I got. And on the final day specifically, I had a very short fuse on day 11. I remember snapping at reporters. I was a brat. The insight here isn't just sleep deprivation is bad. Everyone knows that. The actual insight is more specific and more useful. Your sense of your own competence is one of the first things to go. Randy thought he was winning at pinball when he was losing. He thought he was answering questions when he'd already forgotten the question. The scariest part of severe sleep deprivation isn't that you perform badly. It's that your ability to notice you're performing badly disappears first. That's not just true at 264 hours. It's true after one bad night of sleep, just a much smaller version. The hangover like fog you feel after a rough night isn't only making you slower. It's making you a worse judge of how slow you actually are. This experiment is still cited by sleep researchers today, partly because Guinness World Records stopped accepting sleep deprivation attempts after it. The risk was considered too high to keep testing. If you think losing sleep is the worst thing science has done to a healthy volunteer, wait until you hear what happened when researchers removed something even more basic. Not sleep, sensation. Starting in the 1950s, researchers at McGill University in Canada ran a series of experiments that sound almost relaxing on paper. Volunteers, college students, paid a decent wage for the era, were placed in a small room. They lay on a comfortable bed. They wore translucent goggles that let light in but blocked all shapes and detail. Cardboard tubes covered their arms so they couldn't feel anything with their hands. Foam pillows around their head dulled all sound. No stimulation at all. The original goal was simple: see how long people could tolerate doing absolutely nothing. Most of the volunteers thought it would be easy money. Lie still, get paid, go home. They were wrong almost immediately. Within hours, most participants reported severe difficulty concentrating. Their thoughts wouldn't hold together. Some began talking to themselves out loud just to have something to listen to. Many described intense boredom that escalated into genuine anxiety. The brain, it turned out, doesn't do well with nothing to process. It doesn't just rest. It starts generating its own input. Within a day or two, a significant number of participants began to hallucinate, without any drugs, without any sleep deprivation, just the absence of normal sensory input. They reported seeing geometric patterns, then more complex images, dogs walking, processions of people, entire imagined scenes playing out in front of them with their eyes literally covered. Most participants couldn't last more than 2 or 3 days, even though they were physically free to leave at any time and were lying in a comfortable bed the entire time. Nothing was hurting them. Nothing was forcing them to stay. And still, most people's minds gave out before their bodies did. Cognitive tests given immediately afterward showed measurable, if usually temporary, impairment in concentration, in problem solving, even in basic reasoning. The mind that had nothing to do had not been resting. It had been quietly falling apart. Here's the genuinely useful insight buried in this one. Your brain isn't built to be idle. It's built to process. When you remove all input, it doesn't switch off. It manufactures its own content, and not always pleasant content. This is part of why total isolation is classified as a form of psychological distress, and why modern solitary confinement research draws directly on these findings. It's also, on a much gentler note, part of why doing absolutely nothing, no phone, no sound, no task, is so much harder for most people than they expect. Your brain isn't lazy when it reaches for a screen in a quiet moment. It's doing what brains have always done with empty input, filling it. The first 2 experiments showed what happens when you take something away from a single mind: sleep, sensation. This last one shows what happens when you give a group of ordinary people something instead: power. And it's the most famous psychology experiment of the 20th century, partly because of what it found, and partly because of what we later learned about how it was actually run. August 1971, Stanford University. A psychology professor named Philip Zimbardo recruited 24 male college students, screened to be psychologically healthy, no criminal history, no major issues, and randomly split them into 2 groups. Half became prisoners, half became guards. The basement of the psychology building was converted into a fake prison. It was only supposed to run for 2 weeks. It lasted 6 days, not because the researchers planned it that way, because it had to be stopped. The guards, ordinary college students, randomly assigned that role by a coin flip, essentially, began escalating almost immediately. Within a day, they were taking away prisoner privileges, forcing humiliating exercises, waking prisoners up at all hours for head counts. By day 2, prisoners staged a rebellion. The guards' response was to ramp up the punishment dramatically. By day 4, one of the prisoners, known in the records as prisoner 8612, had what looked like a complete psychological breakdown. Screaming, crying, rage that came out of nowhere. Zimbardo's conclusion, which became one of the most cited findings in all of psychology, was this: ordinary, healthy, screened for normalcy people will adopt brutal behavior shockingly fast if you put them in a role and a system that rewards it. The situation, he argued, was more powerful than the individual character of the people in it. Good apples in a bad barrel turn bad fast. That was the story for nearly 50 years. Then it started to fall apart, not the prisoners, the story itself. In the years since, researchers who dug into Zimbardo's original audio recordings he himself eventually made public, found something he hadn't emphasized at the time. Zimbardo, acting as the prison superintendent, had personally coached the guards. He encouraged them, explicitly, to be tough. One guard later said in an interview, "Throughout the experiment, he knew what he wanted and then tried to shape the experiment to fit the conclusion he had already worked out." And the breakdown of prisoner 8612, the most cited piece of evidence for the entire experiment's conclusion? Decades later, he said in an interview that he had partially faked it, in order to be released early so he could study for an exam. He also said, separately, that the experience was genuinely one of the most upsetting of his life. His own account changed multiple times over the following decades. Even the man at the center of the study's most dramatic moment isn't fully sure what really happened in his own head. Critics also point out something simple that gets lost in the retelling. Only about a third of the guards actually behaved cruelly. Most didn't. Some were even quietly kind to the prisoners when no one was watching closely. That detail rarely makes it into the textbook version, because most people are basically fine, but a third of people will do something awful if coached and rewarded for it, is a much messier headline than ordinary people instantly become monsters. So which version is true? Honestly, both, partially. The situation clearly mattered enormously, but it wasn't a switch that flipped automatically in everyone. It was a push, applied by an authority figure, that a meaningful chunk of people went along with, and a meaningful chunk resisted. Here's the actually useful version of the lesson, the one that survives all the controversy. You are more influenced by the role you're given and the behavior that gets rewarded around you than you probably think. Not infinitely influenced, not helplessly, but more than your gut tells you. The honest takeaway isn't humans are secretly monsters. It's pay attention to what a system is quietly rewarding you for doing, because you will likely drift toward it, even if it contradicts who you think you are. That's true in workplaces, in group chats, in any environment with a hierarchy. Noticing the pull is most of the defense against it. 3 completely different experiments. A sleepless teenager, an empty room, a fake prison. They look like they have nothing in common. They actually share the exact same finding. In every single case, the human mind didn't break randomly. It broke in a specific, predictable direction. Take away sleep, and self-monitoring goes first. Take away sensation, and your brain starts generating its own content to fill the gap. Take away normal social structure and replace it with a new one, and people drift toward whatever that new structure rewards. Your mind isn't a fixed, stable object sitting inside your skull. It's actively, constantly responding to its conditions. Change the conditions enough, and the mind changes with them, faster and more completely than most people would ever guess about themselves. And here's the part that should actually change how you think about your own daily life, not just history. You don't need 11 days without sleep, or a sensory deprivation chamber, or a fake prison to feel a smaller version of all 3 of these. A few bad nights of sleep, a long stretch of boredom with nothing to engage your mind, a workplace or group that quietly rewards behavior you wouldn't normally choose. Smaller doses, same mechanism. So here's what I'd actually take from all 3 of these. Not just isn't that wild, an actual checklist for noticing when your own mind is responding to its conditions instead of operating freely. 1. When you're exhausted, distrust your own sense of how well you're doing. Randy thought he was winning. He was losing every game. After a bad night of sleep, your confidence in your own judgment is often the least reliable part of you. Not your actual judgment, your confidence in it. 2. Boredom isn't empty. It's your brain actively filling a gap. If sitting with nothing to do feels unbearable, that's not a personal flaw. It's the same mechanism that made McGill's volunteers hallucinate within days. Knowing that can make the discomfort easier to sit with instead of immediately reaching for distraction. 3. Notice what your environment is quietly rewarding. Not what it says it values, what it actually reinforces moment to moment. The Stanford guards weren't told to be cruel. They were rewarded, subtly and repeatedly, for it. The same quiet reinforcement happens at work, online, and friend groups. Naming it out loud, even just to yourself, is most of what breaks its grip. None of these three things make you immune to your own mind's limits. Nothing does. But all three of these experiments prove something genuinely hopeful, buried under all the unsettling detail. Every single mind in these studies recovered. Randy slept and was fine. The sensory deprivation volunteers went home and reintegrated within days. Even the Stanford participants, guards and prisoners both, went on with normal lives. The mind bends dramatically under the right conditions. I told you at the start that all three of these were completely legal. That's true. None of these experiments broke a single law that existed at the time. Watch this video again and pay attention to how many small decisions, made by reasonable people, added up to something none of them would have agreed to up front. Dement giving Randy Coca-Cola to stay awake. McGill paying students easy money. Zimbardo coaching guards to be tough. None of those individual choices look monstrous. Stacked together, they produce something none of the people involved fully predicted. That's the thing worth catching on a second watch. Not the shocking details, you already have those now. It's the small, reasonable-sounding steps that got everyone there. That's usually how it actually works, in experiments and in real life. There's a video on this channel about why doctors used to prescribe cigarettes, and it's the exact same pattern. Small, reasonable-sounding steps, taken by people who weren't trying to be villains, that added up to something enormous. I'll put it right there. I'll see you in it.